Very excited to have Simon King as my guest today. And if you've never heard of him, you're probably not alone because I just discovered him a week ago, but I've been binging his stand up and it's great stuff. Very funny and very smart. And I watch a lot of stand up and a lot of it is somewhat recycled and regurgitated, but I feel like Simon King stands out to me at least. I love that he does impressions too. They're very good. And we're going to have a great chat in this episode about stand up comedy, the entertainment business, people's purpose in life, poverty, wealth, and so much more. Buckle up because it's a crazy ride.
I had a poster behind me. It's like a frame thing, and it was like reflecting really harshly. So I was like, I better take it down, otherwise it just looks like. And now it just looks like I'm in a prison cell. it just looks like it's just like First 48 or some shit. It's like, oh
yeah,
no.
like a mental hospital with the white padded walls or whatever. Yeah,
It's exactly appropriate for who I am in my cell of comedy. So it works out well.
yeah. No, I love you. I just watched the one of your specials, and you had a great line in there. You said the only difference between me and a homeless man is that I have a microphone.
Oh yeah, that was furious. Yeah. And actually, that I wrote that joke because I recorded that in 2015. But actually, I originally recorded it in 2013, and then the audio was screwed up for the entire special. Absolute nightmare. We had a theater. We had like, I'm so glad it didn't work out because I prefer the way it looks now. But we had like on the early show, we had like 400 people or something. Like it was the most I'd ever sold tickets in my entire life, and I was like so excited. And they forgot to turn on the audience mics. So I had no audience response off the early show, very little. And then on the late show, which was a better show, they left the house music playing through the master feed. So,
Oh my God.
so it's like just Radiohead songs through my entire fucking set. I was livid. And then, so I I threw away that material. I was like, I'm not going to do it. And then right before I flew to England, that was like 3 weeks before I moved to England, 2 weeks before I moved to England. And a guy I know was a music video director, and he's like, I'll shoot it if you want. I got cameras. You want to just do it? And I was like, well, we're doing a show anyway. Might as well shoot it. So we just added a second show, and it came out great. I'm really happy with it. But, you know, I had to learn to edit to do it because I didn't know how to edit. So I just moved to England like immediately afterwards. Didn't know anybody, and edited. It was shot on Red. And I edited it all on like a MacBook Air from 2014.
Oh, you had to edit it yourself?
I edited. I did the sound editing. I did all of it myself because I didn't know anybody and I was broke as shit. So,
wow,
so,
yeah, it looks professional to me. I mean, the same with the previous one. Both of them are great. I mean, I guess I don't. Well, for me, like a comedy special. I mean, yeah, I guess that does kind of make a difference because if it's really shitty, it's noticeable. But as long as it's like pretty good, like you don't really notice a problem.
Yeah. Well, with the first one, so with Furious, what we wanted to do, which is the one with the symbols on the wall and stuff, we wanted it to look like a punk rock, like bootleg thing. That's what we wanted it to look like. Really hard cuts.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, just that had that feel of like, oh, which is kind of what it was. Like we paid for that special off the door ticket. So it cost nothing to shoot because we got free cameras and people helped out. The last one we did, that one we threw some money at because that we did with a label. Like the Furious I did by myself, no label. This last one we did with a label called Comedy here, often up in Canada here. And they were like, what do you want? They came to me and asked me what I wanted to do. And they wanted to do like a web series or something. And I was like, well, I have a special ready to go. I want to throw some money at this one. And I wanted to bring on my friend Rory to direct it and a few other things like that. And so it just all worked out. And they gave me complete creative control. They just left me alone. They're like, here's some money, away you go. And so you can't ask for a better deal than that, especially as a nobody in comedy. So it was a pretty good deal.
Yeah, explain that to me because I'm just so confused. I found a couple clips of your comedy on Instagram, I think it was, and I was like, holy shit, this guy's good. I was like, oh, he probably won't do my podcast. And then you said yes, and I was like, oh my God, I was so excited. And then because comedians are hard to get as podcast guests because they typically do so many freaking podcasts. And I'm trying to find, you haven't done a lot of podcasts. Like you're kind of like a hidden secret. Like what's going on here? Why are you not more well known? Because your specials are brilliant. They're really
thank you. I really appreciate it. And thank you. I think part of it is because Canada is this weird wasteland of like, so it's so I've worked in the States and I've had experience in the States, but it's extremely expensive for Canadians to come down there. And we have to get O1 visas and things. And they're quite expensive. They take a long time to get. you need sponsorship to bring you down. So you need like an American rep or some sort. And so I had visas and everything. And right before COVID, my visas expired. But there was no point in re-upping my visa during COVID. It didn't make sense because I didn't know how long, I couldn't even get to the States. And I got rid of my management and stuff. It was like just ended up being transitional for me. I got rid of that stuff. And so I just really didn't focus on it. I mean, I've come back and forth to the States, but the kind of comedy I do specifically, and I know that like someone once described me as a high degree of difficulty comedian. Like I don't play clubs very much. I'm not that kind of comic because I'm the kind of comic where like, if I want to do what I do the way I do it, unleashing me on a stagette party on a Friday night's probably not the best fucking idea. You're probably gonna want. So I've cultivated this little fan base up here, and I've been able to, like I said, I essentially haven't played comedy clubs in 13 years, really, maybe 11, 12 years, because I just kind of have started doing this thing where I build this fan base slowly. But I do realize now, and that's one of the reasons we licensed this to release on 800-Pound Gorilla, was because the American market is really where I need to be. And the response has been fantastic. So it has made me think, okay, I need to go back down there. So that's one of the reasons I don't appear on too many podcasts and stuff like that, is because I'm just not too connected to that scene. Like I think I'm well known enough by quite a few comedians in the States. And I think if I pushed to, I could probably go on some of those podcasts. But up until now, I haven't had anything really that I wanted to push. I mean, this one I might start doing it because, like, I think this is something I really want to get out there. It's a good. I think it's. I'm really proud of the work. I'm really proud of the special. The response has been insane. I was not expecting it. I mean, we got more because when we released it in Canada, it went out to basically my fan base, which was about 20,000 views. That's about what we got, and maybe a little bit less, a little bit in about a year. And then we've had, I think, 36,000 since last Tuesday now. So the response has been remarkable. Wow. Yeah,
because it's on American market now or something, or
yeah. So 800-Pound Gorilla Media is an incredible label, and they take a lot of interesting chances with comedians, and they do a lot of great stuff. And they approached us and they were like, "We really like this special, and would you be interested in us releasing it?" And at first I was like, well, I mean, I don't know what difference is it going to make? And they're like, we believe in it. We will push it. We want people to see it. And 100% they've come through. I mean, I really cannot believe the level of support. It's just, Canada's great for comedy. It's great for talent. It's great for becoming a comedian. But in terms of exposure, in terms of growth, there's just the ceiling's real low. I mean, I've done as much as you can do in this country. I've done national television a dozen times in this country. And even then you go to places and people don't know who you are or anything about you. Whereas if I had the same resume in the States.
Move to like LA or New York, or, I mean, really you could move anywhere in the States or you say you don't want to tour because you don't think that your comedy fits well for doing like a Friday or Saturday night club shot?
Well, I don't mind. I mean, I don't. So it's like, it's not that I don't want to tour. It's just that it's, as a comedian, you can only kind of get as big as your fish tank. So your audience has to get to a point where they, like right now, I'm working a new hour and I'm well known. I'm in Vancouver and I'm well known in this city. And I can drop in and do what I want. But even then, I did a Monday night mic and, there was a lot of comics doing regular stuff, which was great. And then I dropped in and I opened up with this huge rant about late stage capitalism. And it's like quite dark. so it's like, you can do it, but when you're dropping into a 5-minute spot and you open it up with good evening drones, and you just it's like, because
people like have to kind of warm up to you. You're not,
have to know what they're getting.
You don't have the one-liners and just like, okay,
I'm not easy. And the thing is, you can do that, and I do have that stuff, obviously. But for me to create the way I want, to do what I want, I really am relying on having, people in the audience that I don't have to explain who I am to before I start. And so I don't mind touring to the States. I don't mind. But we thought that, because I did live in Los Angeles in the mid 2000s, and I have had a relationship with the United States. But it just seemed to me to be like, everything is more decentralized now than it ever was. I mean, even this, like, you found me through Instagram. This is kind of, I think, the way to do it for me. I think I'm a very grassroots kind of punk rocky sort of comic. And I think the people that find me, the people that find me hang on to me, which is great. But I just am also, I'm not going to be one of those guys that's going to be like, I don't think I'm going to have a viral video that's going to go off of me, getting attacked by a heckler. I'm not that sort of dude. I'm the kind of person where, like, the people that like it, and they'll share it with other people that like it, but it's a slow growth.
Dude, but your impersonations, the Bill Burr one, I think the Bill Burr one might be the first one that I saw. And then you had you did like a Marty McFly and you did Bernie Sanders. And they were, but it's not only that you do an impersonation and that it's accurate, it's that you actually mix in a funny joke with the impersonation, which I feel like is a lot of impersonators' problems is they can do the impersonation, but they're just doing an impersonation. There's no joke that goes along with it. Whereas you're like mixing in a joke with it, like putting them in funny situations and things. Like what was the Bill Burr was like, he tells why the chicken crossed the road. Like, yeah.
Well, that's the thing is I think, so to me, like I've always done impressions and stuff. I was being able to do them. I don't do them much in my acts just because I sometimes I'll do them as an encore piece. Like if the audience has been great or anything, I'll do them because it's fun and silly because I've already got through what I want. But I was always of the mind of like, it has to be the joke first. Like I remember one of the first impressions I ever did on stage. This is like 2001. Was because I wrote a joke. I couldn't even do, at that time it was an Arnold Schwarzenegger impression. And I couldn't do, at the time I couldn't do it, but now I can do it. But then I couldn't. So the whole time I'm trying to do this joke and I don't get it right. And then I come up with it. And then I'm like, that's great. So like,
I love that. So perfect. Yeah. It's almost like a whisper. Like you've got you've got it down.
Yeah. He's old now. That's why. That's still a fun one to do.
Oh, God. The funny thing is, great.
And the funny thing is, so I wrote this joke about it and I was like, oh, it'd be so much funnier with the impression. And then I had to get, and then so I just kind of, I just do that, right? Like, it's like, so to me, my voice is similar enough to Billy Burr's because I was born in England and raised in Canada. So I have an English accent underneath a Canadian accent, which means I pronounce certain words at speed or whatever could sound almost Boston. And so it wasn't that hard to do. Like, it's really pretty easy. Dude, you just go like 2 steps over. It's like right there. Like, what?
Has he heard that? Or do a lot of people do Bill Burr? I don't know.
I don't think so. Nia.
I haven't heard too many Bill Burr. Like, I feel like if he saw that, he would think it's funny.
I don't know, dude. So many. But like,
I think he would like your comedy too. I feel like that's like,
I think so.
Is that a thing where you could like, if Bill Burr sees you and says, hey, that was really funny, then you could get on like an opening spot on it because he's playing big places.
Oh yeah. Well, the thing is, I think with comedy too is it's like so much of stand-up. I mean, stand-up comedy, like all of showbiz, this is not a meritocracy. It is you do the best you can and hope that things work out. I mean, the dumb thing about particularly comedy is we're all 2 or 3 viral videos away from selling theaters. It's just the way it works. I mean, and so the best you can do is keep pulling the slot machine, but just work on the craft. Get as good as you can. Do it for the right reasons, which is I do it because I want to be a stand-up comic. I'm lucky enough that I haven't had to have a real grown-up job in nearly over 20 years. So I'm lucky that I've been able to survive doing this. It can be exhausting. It can be tiring. And yes, you definitely do want to get to the next level because there's more security. You can reach more people. I wonder about what I could do if I had the freedom to just play everywhere I go, play people who kind of knew what they were getting before they came in. And then, I would be able to do something. It's like having a conversation with a friend as opposed to a stranger, right? Like when you have a conversation with a stranger, they don't know you, you don't know them. You can't make the same jokes. You can't talk about the same things you don't know. And then, if you put people together who've known each other for 20 years, it's just, you can be so much more free and so much more relaxed. And I think for comedians, that is the next step. And I'm on the precipice of that. So the hope is that, anybody who can, help out getting exposure, it's always good. I mean, to a lesser extent, because I'm obviously not a famous person, but I do it for people, sort of my contemporaries and people below me. I help them out when I can, because I believe that, what's good for comedy is good for comedians. So if a good comedian gets successful, or a comedian who does good things or does interesting things, that's just good for all of us. I never understood this whole being angry at a comedian or upset at someone else in the industry for getting something. You can be mad at the industry. You can be mad at the way the industry operates because they're usually just pencil pushing accountants. They have no soul. But the actual talent, they don't.
My parents are both accountants. That's funnier. Yeah.
But are they Hollywood accountants? Are they?
No.
Are they? Because I've had this conversation with you go in and pitch a show, and they're like, "Oh, that's such a great show. How many TikTok followers do you have?" And you're like, "Okay, here we go." This is like literally how they operate.
I just had this conversation with a musician yesterday. It was the same kind of thing where they go through the same thing. It's like, okay, how many TikTok followers do you have? And it's like. Yeah, but can't you see talent? Like, that's the thing for me is like, when I saw you right away, I was like, oh, this guy's fucking good. And that may be part of your problem too, is that you're not it's not dumbed down. Like this is
Yeah.
you're a comedian for people who watch a lot of comedy. And you're like, okay, this is smart. Whereas other people,
Yeah.
like, I mean, I don't want to name names, but there's some comedians that are more mainstream that it's like if you don't watch a lot of comedy, you're like, oh, that's
Yeah.
so funny. But like for me,
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, I've heard a joke like this a
Yeah.
thousand times. I don't need to
Yeah.
hear the same joke recycled. So yeah.
That's why I said like high degree of difficulty. Like I'm not an entry level comedian, and I
Right.
never
No,
have
you're
been.
not.
And the funny thing is like over time I've slowed down a bit, and I've tried to not make the leaps that, because I always just look at the audience as though they are as smart or smarter than me. I just always assume I'm talking to someone who knows everything I'm about to say, and I don't have to explain things. But the thing is it's not that audiences necessarily aren't smart. They are. They can be very smart. It's just that they don't have the time to spend thinking about the minutia of all these little bits and pieces. They're thinking about snow tires and getting the kids to school and mortgage payment, whatever the hell else they've got to do in their life. They got work in the morning. They, I get to sit here all day and be like, what if I said this about this? And what if I made this spin this way? And to me, it's like a logical jump. But if you just, if you've had a few beers and you're in a club and everything, I got to remember that I'm like, you're not thinking that way. I'm trying to, the bigger, heavier, harder points I try to push, the more I have to work on figuring out how to adapt that to, and that's why sometimes voices and characters and weird stuff does come in, because it's a really great way to kind of like, present the big heavy point, but also be like, and there's some goofiness in here. So if you didn't catch that, you're still going to enjoy this, but then maybe you'll kind of laugh about it and that'll kind of seep into your head. That spoonful of sugar theory, right? And I think that you're right. That is something that's for people who watch a lot of comedy, I think, or people who understand comedy, or at least people who are kind of, their brains work that way. But it's like styles of music, right? Like not every style of music is right for every person. I mean, and if you love country music and you go out to see music and you get punk rock or whatever, it's not going to be what you want. It doesn't matter how good the musicians are. It's just not going to work for you. And so that's what comedy is too. We just don't see it as genre specific, and we should.
Yeah, no, it's just interesting too. Like, because when I clicked on your Instagram, usually when I'm looking at a comedian, like I always have like a bunch of mutual followers and stuff. I'm like, how do I not have anybody in common? And it may be just because all your comedian friends are Canadian, then more so. You don't have a lot of American comedian friends, or?
I have a few, yeah. I mean, it's also like, I mean, I'm very, like I said, I'm kind of an underground dude. Like, I mean, I've been really pushing Instagram and social media since before it came out. But in January, I think I had 2,000 Instagram followers, and I'm just old too. Like I'm 45, so for me, it's like I'm not really I think I had 3,000 TikTok followers until end of February, and then I started to finally catch. But even then, stuff that sometimes you put something out and you think, well, this is the one that's going to catch, and it gets to like 800 grand and it stops, or whatever it is, and I go, what is it that's stopping me from making that next step? And I think some of it is I require a bit of work. Like, I mean, I have a clip right now on Instagram that's the most views I've ever had on a stand-up clip, and it's something like 1.2 million. It's not a lot, but
that's a ton.
Well, I mean,
which one is that?
For me, it's the one about slavery still happening. They're just the iPhone numbers. Yeah. So that's great. That's one of those ones where people watch it and they're just like, oh, okay, I got to think about that.
No, because I think that's the thing about your comedy why I relate to it, because like it's the same things that a lot of the things that I think about, like that one, and then I swear I even like thought of like, I don't do stand up or but I write stuff down, so I'm like, if I ever do, this would be a good bit. And it's the same thing about like your fear of being around black people, and it's not because you're afraid they're gonna hurt you. It's more that you're afraid that you're gonna say something stupid.
Yeah.
I was like thinking the same. It is kind of like a thing as a white guy, like you just go, things are a little tense right now. Like how do I, okay. Like it's like probably 5 years ago, what's something we wouldn't think about as much, but now there's a lot of stuff going on in the world and you're kind of like, okay, I don't want to like say something stupid. And that was really brilliant, I thought.
So that's one of the things that actually came from a conversation with a black comic friend of mine. And we were talking, this is a few years ago, and we were talking, I'm like, the whole time my brain is telling me not to screw up. And he's like, that's hilarious. I'm like, the whole time. And he's like, that's how you're not a dickhead, is that you think that. He goes, because racists and stuff don't think that. He goes, but people who think that are people who like actually care. And he's like, so the whole time because my brain's like, oh my God, don't say anything. You've screwed up so much. It's just so stupid. It's just my neuroses.
It is. It's like the same thing. Like where you think, do you ever like worry like, oh my God, like, what, like, you ever watch the murder shows and you're like,
Yeah.
what if I am a murderer? What if I kill my family? And then you worry like
Yeah.
that you're going to be a murderer, which is like ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it's the same. It's like the neuroses, I think. Yeah, like you
I have a
said.
joke. I have a joke about that, and I go, "This is how I know I could never be either a CEO or a serial killer." Is sometimes before I go to sleep at night, I think about an email I sent 20 years ago, and I get real sad. I'm like, "Oh, I screwed up. 20 years ago I sent this email." I'm like, killers are like, "He's under the bed right now in a box. I got feet on a necklace." And I'm like, "Oh no! What if I bumped someone's car?" Like, I'm just that I would never be a master criminal.
It's like you don't want to hurt people.
Yeah, I'm terrible at it. I'm terrible. I'm just so insecure. I would have such imposter syndrome as a murderer, or a serial killer. I'd be like, I bet other serial killers are better. I'm not even really good at it. I mean, I'm going to kill you all. Fine. Like, I don't even know what I'm doing, Like, I mean, I watched it on YouTube. I'm like, probably screwing this up. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not very confident murderer.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's one of those things that's like, to me, I related to that part. Like, there's a lot of that stuff in your comedy that's, I think, well, it's probably relatable to a lot of people, really. So that's what's so
I hope so.
surprising that I think maybe this podcast will help, but
I hope so.
I hope that more people see your stuff. Like, I think it's great.
When it comes to podcasts and stuff too, it's like my schedule's a bit weird, and it was like you messaged me and I saw what you do, and I was like, this looks fun. This looks like it'll be a good time. And then also it's like, because I enjoy this stuff, and I have some time, and I was like, because the last couple of weeks have been just nuts, because you're doing all this press, you're doing all the things you're doing, and then we finally got this kind of like little bit of downtime. I'm like, oh, I can enjoy the fact that this thing is out now, because we shot this in 2019, the end of 2019, right before COVID. And so what happened was, we shoot it right before COVID in December 2019. We start going to post in February because we had some time. And then I couldn't even go because my editor, Millen Curry Sharples, who also co-produced it and produced it and executive produced it, he's in Toronto. I couldn't get to him. So then the editing process, because I couldn't fly, because I couldn't go. So the editing process turned into us going back and forth with notes. And we had 6 cameras over 2 shows. So we had a lot of footage to go through. And he and I are both perfectionists, to the point where we used mostly the Late Show, but there are some times where, like, halfway through, I flubbed the second part of a word, and I'm like, that's got to go. That's got to be the early show. We got to switch it. He's like, really? Yep, it's got to be. So it's like, it's got to be right. And because of that, once it was done, we had some issues, technical issues that we ended up getting solved. Once it was done, then we were like, okay, well, now let's look to distribute it. And when the distribution came around, it was like, a lot of people like, oh, Netflix or Amazon or whatever. And some people said no. And then the people that said yes, it was like one of these things where, like, if you hand this to Netflix or Amazon or something like that, they own it then, and they can do what they want with it. And you can't cut it up or put clips out or anything. And I realized,
really?
Yeah, that's it. Unless you can't do anything with it. So if they take it and then they go, okay, well, we own this now, maybe they will push it really hard, and it might be their golden ticket. What will probably happen, particularly with someone who's unknown, is that they'll take it, they'll air it for maybe a month, it'll fall down the roster and disappear, and then it's gone forever. I can't do anything with it. If I license the audio separately or whatever, maybe I can do that. But when it comes to the actual video, I couldn't cut up clips like this and put it out. And so
That's
I was
interesting,
talking,
because I thought I had a comedian on, Fahim, and his special was on CISO, which is like, it was like there for like a year, and then
I remember CISO, yeah.
Yeah. So he had a special on CISO, and then I think he somehow got it on Amazon, but he's posted tons of clips. So maybe is that part of the deal, where like
it depends on the deal. It depends on the deal and how you do it. And I think maybe in that case, because it was on CISO, and there might be some sort of difference. But I think people like Netflix and stuff are particularly picky about it.
That's interesting. The clip promotes the special,
right? And in my case, the clip has done more. I think clipping it out and using it as promotion pieces has done far more for me. Because I am the kind of comic I am. Yeah. And because I'm the kind of comic I am, because I am that sort of grassroots guy.
Yeah. Because I'm not going to just turn on a special of a comedian I don't know. The only way I find comedians is usually through clips.
Exactly. So you'll see like a minute clip and you'll be like, oh, I'll give this guy another. And what I found,
and you watch the other clips. That's what I did with yours. I watched a bunch of them. I was like, oh, I binged it. I was like, oh, this is hilarious. And
and then you find the special. And I think that's what's happened with me. What I've noticed is that, so I was talking to a friend of mine who does social media, and he's trying to help me figure out this, because I'm so analog, it's not even funny. And then he's like, looking at my numbers. He goes, your numbers aren't crazy high. He goes, they're growing slowly. He goes, but if you look at it, he goes, people go through and they watch like 10, 12, 15 clips. And he goes, and then they share. And he goes, and so he goes, you're getting actual people who care about your work. And you're not. So case in point, like I'm not losing, you know how your numbers fluctuate, particularly on TikTok. They go up and down quite rapidly. Mine don't. They seem to slowly, you know, I'll only add maybe 1,000 fans a day or 800 fans a day, but those people seem to stick around. And so,
Damn, that's a ton though. That's like more than I have.
well, I
Yeah,
think it's like,
comedians are big on TikTok and stuff.
yeah, and that's the thing too. It's like, and I look at what like, and one of the hardest parts and one of the pitfalls in this, and I think any industry, particularly comedy, is really bad for it. I can only speak to what I know, but is that you see what other people do that's successful, and you don't understand why, and you can't see what, like, why has that guy got 2 million followers? What has he done? And you look at his clips and you go, I don't understand. It's because they are different from you. The whole idea of stand-up comedy is to be individual and to be different, and yet somehow the business part kind of pushes it into trying to be the same thing. And I think that's dangerous. I think that, you know, kind of waters down the art form. And then hopefully if you get successful enough, you can then be yourself again. I want to skip that part where you've got to kind of be homogenized. I want to just get better I mean, I've been doing comedy for 23 years. I'm probably about 10,000 shows in. I'm 45 years old. I am at, if I'm lucky, the midpoint of my career. I've probably got another 20 years left or whatever, maybe more, who knows? But I want to continue growing. I don't want to take steps back. It took me a long time to get where I am and to learn how to do what I do and to be confident in saying the things I'm saying and pushing the way I'm pushing. And I don't want to take steps back just for numbers on a computer screen. I'd rather leave good work than leave a follower count. You know what I mean?
No,
I mean,
absolutely. Yeah.
you know, that's kind of it. It's like, as long as the bills are paid, which, you know, is hard in Canada too, because we just don't have the population, right? Like, so for me, the next nearest town for me to drive to that has a decent population is 4.5 hours away from Vancouver, 4 hours. And so that's
Seattle?
the next, no, that in Canada. I mean, if I stayed
Canada.
in BC.
Yeah.
And so the whole population of Canada fits in California. In fact, there's more people in California than Canada. And so you got to think about just the simple lack of numbers of how to get, and it's a massive country too. It's huge.
Do you go to Seattle a lot though? Because I used to live in Seattle and I used to drive to Vancouver. Isn't it only like 2 hours? Like, or do you have to get
Seattle.
that visa thing again?
Yeah, Seattle's great, but in the visa, you can't even do really free shows. As long as someone paid to get in, you're breaking the law if you do the show. So it's unfortunate because
is the visa expensive?
It's about $5,000, but that's not the thing that's so hard. The thing that's hard about it is finding representation. So like, I don't have an American manager or agent right now for various reasons, and also because managers and agents, they have to also kind of be on board. They have to believe in you. They have to believe what you do. You know, if they're going to push you in the right direction and make the right decisions for you and help you get where you need to get, they need to really understand who you are and what you do. And so I've had some managers and agents that didn't quite get that, and nothing against them. I'm a unique guy. I'm a bit weird. And so they didn't quite know what to do with me. And then the industry kind of pushed away from dudes like me for a while, which is fine, understandable. It has to equalize. I get that. I'm not upset about that at all. But it also means that it's harder and harder to find the right people that match. And so we talked about someone like Bill Burr or something. Anyone who reps someone like Bill Burr or something like that's probably going to see someone like me and be like, oh, that's the kind of thing I like. So you just look for the comedians you look for comedians who are similar to you, have similar styles to you, have similar kind of appeal to you. And then you look at who reps them and you go, well, that might be a better fit. And so that's the next step, is to start approaching. Once I find that, I'll go get my papers again, and then I'm back in the States. But I don't know if I'll ever live there again. I have a child. He's 6, and you know, my wife up here and everything. I don't want to relocate them.
No, I don't think you need to. But touring, I think touring the States, especially, I'd love to have you come down to Arizona here where I am now. Or
oh yeah, I'd love to go to Arizona, man. I was actually, speaking of Arizona, I just saw Doug Stanhope on Saturday. He's down from Bisbee. He lives in Bisbee. It's a couple hours from here. Oh god,
yeah, I've heard people just show up at his house in Bisbee, and he's like, "Yeah, come on in." Like,
yeah. I guess if you make the trip to Bisbee, because it's not like you can fly in. So
no, it's a fun town though. I don't know if you've ever been there. It's
I've never been. I want to go. I listened to his podcast, and it's just talking to him, and I was like, you know, yeah, I gotta, because I realized too, it's like I'm missing out these opportunities to see people who are my friends and that I like and stuff. Like, I have to go to LA soon to do some promo for this, and I just realized I'm like, oh, all these comics I'm going to see that I hadn't seen in years, you know, because like I used to live down there, and they've all gone on and had their careers and stuff and everything, but it's still, you miss them, right? It's like, oh man, because they never come up here, because why would you? So it's like, you know, I guess it's just sort of that thing where you like, I can go down, do the stuff I need to do, and come back. But I definitely want to start working the American market more, because I think that if if there's in Canada, if there's 36 million people, and if I don't know, like 10% of them like what I do, that's 3.5 million people. If 10% of people in the States like what I do, that's 35, 36 million people, 32 million. You know what I mean? So the difference for me in being able to get my point across, because I know that the UK, like I do well in the UK, and that translates well too. And I did live there for a while, and things went well for me there. But I think ultimately, unfortunately, the way our business works, it all just comes down to numbers. So if we were having this conversation and I had 400,000 Instagram followers, it would probably be a different conversation, because it would be.
Probably wouldn't be having it with me. It would probably be a real podcast.
I 100% would. I 100% would. Because I have a podcast too, and I used to never have guests on. It used to be just me, and then I started booking guests at the beginning of last year because I was just got bored of doing it by myself. Sure. And I know how hard it is to book, and how hard it is, like, and when you get someone on, you're like, I've been lucky. I've had people who are like really cool on, but every time I book someone, I'm like, oh, I don't know. Like, it's like, so I always feel like whenever someone approaches me, I'm like, I will do my best. So to make it as good as possible, because I know how hard it is to do, man.
Yeah, didn't you say? I was listening to one of your episodes. The podcast is called "What's Wrong with Simon King," and you were saying that you have some bigger name friends that you could have on the show.
Yeah.
And so, are you kind of saving that though, or have you kind of had some of that?
Well, no, I haven't had them yet, and I think part of it was too is like I think I really wanted to get kind of a bunch of episodes under me. You want that back catalog; it's always important. Right. And then also until I had. Because I think that the mistake sometimes people do is, especially if they have people with profile they can put on their podcast, I think sometimes they do it all at once at the beginning and try and kind of get everyone on. And I think that's a dangerous thing to do, because I think you're going to, you maybe get listeners for that one episode, but then you don't get them for anything else. Whereas I think what you probably should do is, if you have guests that have a good profile, everything, maybe every other episode you put one of those people on, so that it helps continue with that. And I mean, I know a lot of them are like more than willing to do it and more than happy to do it. And I also, I want to go down to where they are and I want to kind of, make it easy as possible for them. And like I said, these are people I want to hang out with anyway. So it's a good excuse to go visiting. So I think I'm going to try and work on that in the next few months, and then we'll start putting some more guests. I mean, we're going in the studio next, and we had studio problems too, and that was the other problem. I didn't have my studio went, and then I didn't have a new studio, and I can't be like, hey, come to my living room, it doesn't work. So now I can kind of like, I'm more mobile now, and I can do that. So I think I'm going to start doing that. I'm going to focus more on my podcast now. The special's out, I can focus more on the podcast, and that's another one of those things, slow growing. We have a good amount of listeners. They don't watch it on YouTube, but they listen. I don't know how to get them. I feel like they're old. Like getting them, moving them to YouTube is hard.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because I feel like mine, it's the opposite. YouTube. Yeah. Like, you'll have some that on YouTube won't get anything, and then you'll have some that get thousands. Like, it's just like, it's all over. It depends for me. It depends on the guest, and it's not always the big names. It's sometimes it's people that haven't done an interview in a while. That people are hungry for, but sometimes the bigger names do so many podcasts that like nobody cares.
Yeah, it does get to a point that too, and I think that's the other thing too. Is like, what did they say that? What is it? What's that expression? It's scarcity is value, right? So it's like the less you're around, the more people want to see you, right? So like if case in point, if someone like a Jim Carrey does an interview, you're probably like, I wonder what he's up to. I haven't heard from him in like 8 years, and so you watch that. But I think you're right. I think if someone's on and that's the other thing about, I think, putting out, like, because with this, when you release something like this, then it's always like, well, how do you keep the momentum going? I think if you do it all too much at once, you just kind of burn people out. They're like, oh, this guy's on another podcast, this guy's doing another thing. It's like, there's only so many times you can talk about a project. There's only so many times you can say the same thing. Right. I actually have a joke in my act about how, like, you'll do 15 interviews in a row, and they haven't seen it. I mean, it's great because you've actually watched what I do, which is awesome. But
I tried to watch like more interviews and things. I couldn't find stuff. So that's why I don't know, like, I don't know your story other than you were born in England, raised in Canada. I guess you've been doing comedy for 23 years. So
yeah.
So, but you started in Canada?
Yeah. So I come from a show business family. So my parents were in a band in the 60s and 70s. And
what band was it?
They were a band called the Silhouettes, and it was in England and then in Europe, and like all through Europe. So they used to tour the American bases during the Vietnam War and stuff like that, to like as USO type stuff. And then my mom had a solo career in the late 70s, early 80s in England, and she got tired of it. And England was a real rough place at that point. Like, I was about 5 years old. It was like 1982, and England was just beat up. It was just burned out. And
Hmm.
so they decided to either move to, I think it was Tasmania, or move to Canada. And they chose Canada, which is probably pretty lucky for me because I don't think that would work for my accent. Anyways, so I
That would
moved
have
to
been
Canada.
interesting.
Yeah, right. Just yelling about the government. Just, but so we moved to Canada, and my mom got back into acting and theater, and my dad was an optician. He got out of show business basically, and then kind of came back into it here and there. But I did my first ever performance on stage when I was 7. I was in a play, and then I kind of dabbled in live theater and stuff, and did all that here and there. And then when I was in my late teens, I did some sketch comedy, and I really loved it. And then I didn't know much about stand up at all because it was it's the late 90s. Like there's no social media and stuff. And I went to a comedy club and I was like, that is what I want to do. And then I did my first set and I was like, that is what I do now. I don't care what happens. It was so good. It was so like
The first
freeing
time,
and
usually
like
the first time people bomb.
I loved it. I had a great time. And I go, this is what people said. They're like, oh, you had a good first set. You're going to bum for a month. I was like, I don't know, man. I just enjoy it. It was really fun. And I loved it. And then it's just been, and then I did it for like 6 months or so. And then I had to take a bit of a break because I had a real grown up job. And so I would only do comedy once a month. And then I got to a point where, with the support of my lovely lady friend, she was like, you need to focus on this. And I was like, I need to focus on this. And then I just became a full-time comic. And it's
Wait, so
hard. It's so hard.
what was the job that you did? What was the grown up job?
I worked in basically cable services and technical management for a cable company up here, for like a
Okay.
Shaw Cable, so like a Verizon type idea. And I was like a phone technician, so I would help people
Okay.
work through, which, based on the way my brain works, is ridiculous because I would just do voices and be silly the whole time. But they like talking to me. The techs like talking to me because I was just doing goofy shit. But then I just focused on being a full-time comic. And in 2004, in the end of 2004, I did the San Francisco and then the Seattle comedy competitions. And at the San Francisco comedy competition, I made it to the semis. I didn't get out of that, but I got seen by this scout for the HBO Aspen US Comedy Arts Festival, which I didn't know what it was because I'm Canadian. I didn't know. And I also had been seen by a scout for Just for Laughs, which I knew what it was. And I thought Just for Laughs was the thing I wanted. And then HBO called me in the December, offered me the festival, and they offered me like 6 or 7 shows, including opening for Dane Cook and a bunch of stuff. And I was like, this is great. It's a trip to America and all this stuff. And Just for Laughs, I think, offered me like a 1 show. And I was like, well, I didn't know you had to choose, but I was like, I'm definitely going to do the HBO one. Little did I know at the time that not only is that a credit that I think only 2 or 3 other Canadians have. Dave Nystrom, who I went with, who's an amazing comic as well. There very few Canadians have it. And it's a festival that's now defunct, but was also the hub for industry because everyone wanted to go to Aspen to snowboard and ski on the studio's dime. And so I got picked up by some reps there, and then it was kind of surreal. I'd been a comic for about 5 years. I'd only been a headliner for like 2.5, 3 years. I was very new to comedy, and then all of a sudden I was in this Hollywood machine, and so like you're going to meetings and you're doing all this stuff, and I had no idea of my place in the world, and I just kind of got really exhausted with the industry. After about 3 years, I was just like, this is brutal. Like
Was this when you were living in LA?
Yeah, this is when I was living in LA. So I didn't have papers at first, and then my agents paid for my papers, which was huge. They did that because there's no way I could afford it because I was a broke comic, and they did that. And then once I got my papers, the financial crisis in the States happened, where the huge economic crash. There were writer strikes. There's everything. So everything, just the wheels fell off. It was the worst timing possible. So there I am sitting in the States with these papers, with no work, no nothing going on, no booked work, no nothing, just like doing nothing. And I would come back to Canada, and I would do work, I would do stand up, and it would just be brutal. I would just do stand up just to make money to go back and feed my Los Angeles habit. And I got to a point after I had a really close call. I almost got, when they rebooted Mad TV, it was down to me and one other actor for that. And he got it, well deserved, very, very funny guy, but I did not. And I remember thinking at that point, I'm like, that's a good place to put a bookmark in this. Let's go back to Canada. Let's be a comedian. I recorded an album at the end of 2009, which I'd never done before. I recorded it, and then I was like, you know what? I think I'm done with stand-up. Like, it's just beat the hell out of me. I hated myself. I hated what I was doing. And I did a show in, so I had all these dates I had to finish out, and I was like, I just don't want to be a comic anymore. I hated how I just needed it to make money. And even, killing for the wrong reasons is bad. Like when you're doing jokes and you're getting laughs for the wrong reasons. And was doing a show up here at this little tiny bar run by a buddy of mine, and it was one of those nights where like the comics were amazing and the audience sucked. They just hated everybody, and I was closing up, and I went up and I started doing the set that I was doing at the time. And I was killing, I was murdering. And about 10 minutes in, I stopped and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do this for you. I was like, I hate me for doing it. I hate you for laughing at it. And then I spent the next 25, 30 minutes just talking, like, just being honest who I was for the first time, really fully. I mean, I was kind of.
Oh, wait, what was the material you were doing that you didn't like? It was phony material?
Well, no, it was. I put out an album called Unfamous back in like 2010, beginning of 2010. And that was basically the culmination of that style, which was like a lot of like much goofier, much sillier. I still had political stuff and everything, but not like I do now. I just didn't have the confidence in who I was to, it's almost like in stand-up comedy, you have to get really, really good so you can start getting good. Like you have to be able to control the room and do everything. You have to be able to kill all the time, have that confidence, all that material before you can start taking risks and getting good at it. And so I was at the point where I was going to quit because I was like just exhausted with comedy. And then I did that set and it went well and it went poorly. Like people were happy and not, and it was good and it was bad. And I left to this kind of applause and this feeling of like, oh, I don't have to dance like a monkey to get through this. I can do what I want. And I came off stage and my buddy who ran the place, and I said to him, I was like, I'm so sorry. Like I was not very professional of me. And he goes, if you do that every time, you might be a good comic one day. And that was what kicked off the next phase of my career. I threw away every joke I had. I stopped doing voices, characters, and impressions. I put them away, didn't touch them for years, to the point where a lot of comics didn't even know I could do them. I didn't touch them. I went straight into everything, like that special Furious. It was all like that. It was, and I wrote hours and threw them away, and I just didn't do anything other than just be a comic. And luckily I had established a reputation for myself where I could continue to get work, even though I had drastically changed styles. And I found that like, if I wanted to learn, so I knew that I wanted to do that kind of comedy, but in order to do that, I had to forget what I already knew. Like it's like learning a new martial art. You have to forget all the muscle memory, learn again. And then when you put them all together, you'll have everything. And so I did that for 5, 6, 7 years, developed this style, got this material, became, what I consider a much better writer, much more confident. Then I started putting everything together, which is what you can see in As Good As or Better Than, which is the last special I put out. I'm starting to combine all the things. So you've got a little bit of goofy, you got a little bit. So I'm confident enough in how to say what I want, but I'm also going to give people silly as well. So I write
like when you drop in the impressions, like that's funny.
Yeah. So that's the thing, is like, so you can do that because you can do that. It means that you can say these incredibly, hard things. Like, for instance, it's a good example of like, there's a bit in it I talk about how we lie to ourselves about who we are. We don't live genuine lives because we compare ourselves all the time and we manufacture existence. So people pretend they're I'm not normal, I'm different, but they don't actually do things to change their lives. They do things to appear to change their lives. But then, and that ends with a goose noise, because I find goose
that was a perfect goose noise too.
Thanks. I found goose noises funny, and it's also a great. So you hit people with these heavy things, right? So it's like a roller coaster. A roller coaster always going up or always going down is no fun. It has to do this. If it doesn't do this, it's no fun. So I'm going to back foot you with all this stuff about like the end joke about is anybody stupid? And do all that, and then I do Stephen Hawking with chainsaw arms, because it's like, okay, that's the release. But it's like, it's so funny when I said thank God Stephen Hawking was a bundle of sticks in a wheelchair. The amount of times people go, oh, I'm like, he's dead. He doesn't know. He doesn't care. He would have liked it. So
yeah, it's a joke. That's what
I like that. I like that. I like making people just a little bit back-footed and weird. And when someone comes up to me and they goes, I liked almost all of it, I'm like, that's perfect. Because if you like, you know what I mean? Like if one or two things throws you off, I'm like, I feel good about that. Because like, and you definitely define your fan base. Like with TikTok and Twitter and Instagram and stuff, you get people who are like, most people have been super complimentary. It's been remarkable. Like the special, the comments on the special, never mind the views, the actual comments are so flattering and so wonderful, and I'm so grateful. But every so often you get someone who's like, another white guy apologizing for being white, and I just put underneath him like, I'm just like, well, if I appealed to you, I'd be doing my job wrong. So off you go. Like I don't want those fans, you know what I mean? So it's good. It's like I feel like I'm doing the right thing. As long as I'm upsetting the monsters and making the smarts happy, I feel like I'm doing okay. I feel,
No, I think you're doing great. Yeah, that's why I'm just like kind of surprised that you're not bigger, but maybe you're gonna be. I mean, what you look at like Bill Burr, I mean, he really didn't blow up until he was in his what, 40s or 50s?
Oh yeah, he was in his mid to late 40s, about the same age as I think,
Yeah.
because he put out because he had some success. That's the other thing too about the American system that is different from ours. A lot of the comics that you see now in America that are successful or big are people who have already had one good go at it. Like Bill is a good example. He's an incredible comedian. There's no
Yeah, I
arguing
remember
that.
seeing him on Conan for years. Like, and
Conan
same
for
with Louis
years.
C.K. He would have
Yeah.
both those guys, and then they both didn't blow up until like way later. But I remember seeing guest spots repeatedly.
I think Louis was like 41 or 42 when Shoot Up and Shameless came out, and he'd been in the system a long time. Bill, I think, was in his 40s. So I think that's a good thing for stand up too, is because comedians mostly we're not pretty boys, or we're not here for our looks or whatever. We're here for the material, and it doesn't really matter what you look like. So age doesn't really work as much. In fact, it's a benefit to be older. I can sell material now. I can say things now with more gravitas and more reality to them than when I was like a baby-faced 25-year-old. Because I mean, I'm 45 now, don't quite look 45. You can imagine without a beard what I looked like when I was 25 years old. I looked like a teenager. So I couldn't say the things I want to say now, even if I wrote them, because someone said to me once, like, you can't complain about the world unless you look like you spent a night in a Mexican prison. Like, that's the point. That's the way it looks. So I have to have a little bit of sadness to me, and it works well. And I think those comics too, I think you look at Louis, Doug Stanhope is a great example. Doug Stanhope's a genius. He's a genius comic. He was on the Man Show and everything in the late 90s, early 2000s. He put out No Refunds, which I think was his first and really incredible work when he was 40 years old. And then since then, I think his 40s and his 50s, I saw him on Saturday, and I think it's his best work yet. And Carlin's a good example. Carlin really, I mean, yeah, he put out great stuff and everything, but he was in his 50s before, Playing With Your Head, Back in Town, or, those things came out. And I'm like, when those came out, you're like, okay, this is a guy who's found his feet. And so I think that
he used to wear like a suit. He was totally different. Like,
he was hippie dippy weatherman.
Did you watch that Carlin documentary about him?
I haven't seen it yet. No, I keep forgetting to watch it. I gotta watch it because I love it.
That's a perfect example of what you're talking about. How he was very straight laced, and then he realized one day he's like, I got to be myself, and he totally changed his style and everything. Because he used to wear, like, if you look at it like the black and white, he's wearing like a suit and stuff, and it's totally different. So
I think a lot of comics make that. I think a lot of comics make that step, and I think that's what you talk about, you getting good so that you can get good. Like, I think Carlin had a great career. He was like guest hosting, I think it's Tonight Show, but either way, he was like making a lot of money in casinos. He had this clean cut comedy. And then he just kind of snapped one day when he was like in his mid 30s, and he was like, I'm just going to do what I do. And then he released AM/FM, which is like, this is the old stuff. This is the new stuff. And then he was like, I'm making a very clear point of now I am George Carlin the way I wanted to. Same with Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor was essentially like a Bill Cosby ripoff when he was young. He just would show up in a suit. It was really like friendly stuff. And then one day just snapped. And then Richard Pryor showed up. And I think that this happens with comedians. I mean, even if you look at Louis C.K.'s early stuff, like his Live in Houston album, a lot of it's much more absurd. Like, I have a peach. It's all absurd stuff. It's nowhere near what he came out with. When Shoot Up and Shameless came out, I think he had been through the ringer enough that he was like, I am pissed and I need to express it. And I think that real emotion, if you're going to be that kind of comedian, or if that kind of comedian is who you are, I think you sometimes need that push to get over the edge. And for me, it was, I think, I'm not putting myself in that category, obviously, but I'm saying my evolution came from when I was like, I'm either going to quit, or I'm going to do it my way until I have to quit. So I'm just going to do it my way until I have to quit. And then, fuck me, it works.
Yeah, no, I think and also I think it's kind of like what you're saying earlier, where when you give the creative control to someone else, like if you look at Louis, I don't know if people know, but he did a sitcom that was like terrible. I think, I mean, I don't know if I ever saw it. I don't think anybody saw it. And it was like something that, the network said, oh, you got to be like a family man. And then he did a show, Louis, which I think was brilliant, because it's exactly what you were saying earlier about the roller coaster. And that's kind of how I try to do my podcast. I'm like, I want to do a podcast where I'm talking about like super serious, like sad, depressing things. And then the next minute we're like laughing our asses off. Like that's the kind of like show I want to do.
I love that. I love that. That's what I do with mine. I think that, like, we'll get into, like, even I actually did my first yesterday. So mostly I'm in the studio. I had guests. I couldn't get in the studio this week. So I did one just by myself, like old school style. Because it used to be like a diary of like a working road comic, and it got a bit bleak there because life was really rough before I moved to England and kind of got myself sorted out. And so I went back to I did one yesterday, but I did a live stream on TikTok while I was doing it. So I recorded the podcast and did a live stream. And it was funny because we were having a fun time. I was just basically doing a podcast to say thanks to everyone who watched the special and, talk about some stuff. And then someone mentioned something on TikTok, and I got into this discussion about, like, one person discussion, which was really weird. This sort of monologue about what it means to comedians when you see things like heckler videos and stuff become the norm, and crowd work stuff become the norm, and what it means to us to see that, like, the actual art form, the work of comedy, is maybe not being as appreciated and everything, and not necessarily negative against the comics that do that. I'm just saying that, like, from how we feel about it, and it turned into this kind of thing about comedy as an art form. So it started out with, like, me asking, which kind of insect, if you have to punch an insect, which would be the most most comforting. Like, hey, if you punched a murder hornet, you get some real feedback on it. You feel good, but if you punch a fly, you're not going to notice. That's how it started. And it ended up with this big, deep thing about this. So I think following where your brain is going, I think being as unscripted as possible and allowing it to happen is one of the most refreshing, enjoyable things to see, because you get a real insight into how someone's brain works, as opposed to the regimented. Like, whenever I go on a podcast, like, I love stuff like this where we can just chat. Whenever I go on a podcast and we're doing this section, and then we're doing this section, and we're doing this, it's just like, okay. But then the whole time you're thinking, well, this is coming up now, and I got to do, what's my favorite hot wing sauce? Yay.
No, you're right. That's how I used to do my pod. I was very chronological.
Yeah.
And I would tell people's story, which I think sometimes is interesting, but also I've learned to just try to listen a little bit more to the guest and follow, because sometimes the guest gives you something. You're like, if I don't go down this rabbit hole, like, I'm missing out.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. I think especially when you're dealing with creatives as well, because I think a lot of creative people, they get into the field because their brains don't necessarily work in exactly the same way. Like, I have some friends who are like scientists and like doctors and stuff like that. And the way they think is incredible. They think like A plus B equals C, which equals this, which does this. And their process is remarkable. They're able to stay on task, focused and everything. I'm all over the place. Like, I have, like, it's just, and this is how I write. Like, I don't even sit down and write comedy. I go on stage with an idea, yell about it, remember it. I don't record my sets. I don't write stuff down very much. I rarely ever write anything down. Everything you see that I do has come from me riffing on stage and ranting, and then just somehow remembering the feelings of where it's supposed to go. So I got asked to teach a comedy course once, which I won't do. I mean, I'm happy to tell people whatever I know, but I'm not going to, I don't even know how it works. And then I realized, I'm like, how can I fucking explain that to anybody? How I write? I can't explain that. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, it's just kind of like, I go up and I like had this, like, I went up to talk about the monarchy, the coronation of King Charles on Monday. I had one joke in my head I wanted to say, and then I ended up ranting for 3 minutes about it.
What is your thoughts on that? Now, I don't really follow that. My girlfriend's kind of into it, though. But I'm curious what you thought about that.
Well, to me, monarchy is antithetical to equality. Like, you cannot have equality when you have the head of a class system. When you have someone spending £230 million on getting a funny hat on, and there's people starving in the streets. I'm like, if every problem's solved and you want to wear a funny hat and you want to spend money on that, that's fine. But it's also, like, to me, the idea that, some group of people are more superior based on who their mother was seems ridiculous to me. The idea of a class system like that. And so I'm a democratic socialist. I'm anarcho-syndicalist. Like, I'm this kind of person where I really believe that people if we don't learn to rule ourselves, we're not going to be able to. It's always going to be people pulling us around. And so the monarchy is the last vestige to me of people. I mean, I said on stage, I'm like, look, if he killed his mom with a broadsword and took the crown, I'd be like, well, fair. You know what I mean? Like, that's how they used to do it.
Well, that's the thing, is like, they're rewarding, like you said, who their father is, like the blood. Yeah. There's no achievement there. I mean, it's not like they even run. It's all just this like weird system that's like, and technically they don't even really do anything. Isn't it all symbolic? No. They have a real people that run the country anyway. So
that's the thing. So basically, it's just they're essentially welfare queens who live in state housing, and they're spend millions and millions of pounds. And the funny thing about it too is like to me, I think that, like, because someone said to me, because I'm very like, I have a real problem. Look, I don't have any problem with wealth. I don't have any problem with people having money. That never bothers me. I have a problem with greed. I have a huge problem with greed. I think greed is a mental illness. If you're willing to harm other people knowingly to enrich yourself, if you're okay with other people suffering so you have more, no. If you have more and you do what you can to help, I don't care. If you want to have $150 billion, but you help people and you got that ethically, if it's possible, go down. I don't care. Do what you want. Whereas to me, it's like, because people like, shouldn't you be anti-billionaire? I'm like, it depends on the billionaire. I mean, the general idea that someone would have that much is a bit ridiculous in such an uneven society. But there's, you know,
But what if someone's, sometimes people are just really good at doing something and they created a product and it's like, I mean, and I think
I don't have a problem
some
with
of them give away their money, but what are they supposed to? I mean, they're bringing in like these billionaires that are, you know, like, I love Amazon, I love iPhone, I love a lot of these products that they're creating, but you look too, like, then you kind of feel like a hypocrite because it's kind of like what you said with the child slavery. You're like, well, we all own iPhones, and it's like, we don't really want to talk about how the iPhones was made, but
well, our society is a society of convenient remembering. Like we try to forget the things that are terrible because it's not our. The thing is too is like, I don't blame consumers and I don't blame people for living in this. You are in the society you're in. You have to adapt and live in the society you're in. It's not like you not getting an iPhone is going to stop it. What you can do is you can, like with billionaires, you can say maybe we should elect governments that, you know, tax them appropriately. That's the first step. And maybe that tax money can go to helping people who are in these sweatshops or whatever. That's the next step. And so, you know, you can kind of triage these things and move it along. No one's expecting you to build a guillotine and solve the problem. Everyone's expecting, you know, we need to kind of move in the right way. But what bothers me the most is that, sorry, that's this guy. What bothers me the most is that, you know, people will say things like, you know, like somehow like billionaires not paying their fair share is somehow like, oh, well, they just achieved. And no, most people who have that level of wealth, most people, there are some people who invent things, but most people who have that level of wealth come from privilege and come from, we're given that generational wealth or debt ability because the system doesn't tax them properly and everything. So if we imposed appropriate regulation on these people, there would probably be, the billionaires would be slightly less wealthy. Do you need 190 billion? Can you have 110? Does it really make that difference? But the one thing is, at least there is still a chance to become a billionaire. No one's saying you can't. You can never become a royal family member unless you marry one of them. You know what I mean? So it's like, so it's like even the billionaire class, however much it's perverse and it's weird and all this other crap that's going on, the majority of billionaires, you know, take advantage of a system and it's antisocial and all the other shit it is. At least there is still technically an open door to get into it. You could invent something. You could do something. You can never, ever be in England. You can never be a royal class. So you would see these people in England who are broke, who are high class, and they think they're better than everyone just because of their dad was a baronet or something. It's insane. It's insane to me that you would take any value of merit and effort out of a system and just basically give people preferential treatment by birthright. That's just nuts. I just don't see why in 2023 we allow that to happen. Unless, like I said, it's trial by combat. If Prince Charles is like, anyone who wants to fight me can be king, and he just defeated people, if he did that, you know what? Fair enough, man. Like, I'd pay to see sausage fingers fight.
Two people think that that's so great and to be in the royal family. But what's the girl, Kate Middleton or whatever? Like, she's like, oh, this is so terrible. I think she's being a little dramatic, but also it's like, I don't know that I'd want to be in the spot like that. That doesn't seem like that great. No. It's almost like you're kind of being exploited, in my opinion. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think anyone
people allow it is because they like it. There's people that are fans of this. That again, I'm not. I think it's silly and ridiculous, but some people are really into that stuff. And I think that's why we allow it.
I think it's also like people want this weird thing in humans where they always think that it used to be better. There's this weird thing where it used to be better. Well, I mean, it used to be better because you were younger. That's part of it. And it also didn't necessarily used to be better. Hindsight is you know, 2020. Hindsight's 50-50 for me because I drink. But hindsight always paints things rosier than it is in those situations. When in reality, this idea of what England, for instance, was like with the monarchy, it's like, well, if you look at the people that are pro-monarchy, there are also a lot of them pro-Brexit, and they destroyed their own country. They just flattened their country into the ground. So they do these things where they think that it makes Britain stronger or more traditional or whatever, and it almost always, people don't realize that the reason progress is because things used to be a certain way, and we move on, we get better, this whole, you see it a lot with a lot of right wing conservative rhetoric where they say stuff like going back to the way things used to be, the good old days. So the good old days sucked for 99% of people. You know what I mean? Like, good old days weren't good old days, because how far back do you want to go? Like, you want to go 60 years back when kids were dying of polio? How far back do you want to go? And so, or 70 years back. And so I think that people have this thing where change scares them. And so holding on to something that reminds them of a dream they had about what might be, the royal family in this case, gives them comfort. So if you took away the royal family, a bunch of people would think it affected their identity. They wouldn't know who they are. The next generation wouldn't care. The French did it. The French, they pulled it. I can't believe the English are letting the French beat them in that. Come on, let's do it.
Did the French used to have that thing too? When did they get rid of it?
They got rid of it in the French Revolution in the late 18th century. They got rid of it.
Yeah, so it was a long time ago, not in my lifetime. Or
no. They were way ahead of the curve. They were like, you know what, we could.
So when did Britain make it? So they still had it. Obviously, they've had it forever. But when did they make it so that the king really didn't have any power? It was all symbolic. What year was that? Was that similar?
Well,
like 1800?
that kind of passed. There was kind of like a series of events. So England had temporarily a republic. It didn't have a royal family in the 17th century for a little while, Oliver Cromwell and all that. But the king's power, the king and queen's power, was diminished before that. There's been parliament in England since, don't quote me on this, my mom would know this. It's I believe 1300.
Oh, wow.
There's been parliament, but the king and the royal family still maintained massive amounts of power over the last sort of like, I would say Queen Victoria was probably the last really powerful monarch they had, but hers was more cult of personality than anything else. She still had power. She still made decisions. I think when you get into the 20th century, Edward and onward, I think you're starting to look at like, that's when it diminished. I think the world wars made a big difference in that too. If you look at how drastically different the 20th century, even the latter half of the 20th century compared to the first half, compare the first half of the 20th century to the latter half of the 19th century, things changed so drastically in Britain, and because they were the top of the world globally. I think that it really just became something that, a royal family can't run a country like that. It's too big and too powerful. There's too much going on. You're relying on someone who didn't get elected and doesn't know the job to make decisions regarding millions of people's lives, and in state of the world, billions of people's lives. So I think the only logical thing to do is move away. And so what I don't understand is we made that far of a leap. Let's just can it all together. Keep the buildings. Everyone can go visit, Get King Charles a job at a Subway. People go see him.
Well, they would still inherit all the wealth or whatever, I'm sure, right? So they'd
he's got £500 million, and yet the people of England paid for his coronation. So he spent 240 million pounds, which is what, about $350 million on getting a hat put on. And yet there's
happy. Do you think he's a happy person?
No,
I think he's miserable.
I don't think any of them are happy. I honestly don't think. I think Harry and Meghan, I think escaping probably was the best possible thing. I think that, if you look at just how screwed up that entire family, I think that when Queen Elizabeth died, she was the longest serving monarch. She was beloved. That should have been it. They should have been like, all right, we're done here. We did a great thing. Everyone's happy. She was the last vestige of the old royals. She was the last vestige of the 20th century royals. She's done. I think in the 21st century, if you have a royal family, I think something's really screwed up with your, and also I'm an atheist. So divine right of kings makes no sense to me. Like, but none of it makes any sense. Like, it's all ridiculous. And I'm like, okay, we're going to do this. Why a king? Why not have a pharaoh? Bring a pharaoh back. They were fun, plagues, crazy shit. They did lots of fun. Chariot races, an emperor. Come on. Italy should have an emperor.
Pyramids were cool.
How great would that be if they're like, look, we're building a pyramid, and be like, you know what?
We got the Luxor. You ever been to Vegas? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, the Luxor is pretty cool. They got that light on the top that can blind aliens.
No, but so do you think? See, because I don't disagree with you that I think that the greed is an issue. You're right. Like people making money, okay, that's fine. But like the greed, that's fine. But the greed is an issue. But what about the people that are not achieving their potential. Because to me, I feel like that's a bigger issue. I think
Yeah.
that's how you knock down all these billionaires
Yeah.
is you create competition.
Yeah.
Who's competing with the iPhone? Who's competing with Amazon? Like, and granted,
Yeah.
I'm sure some of that is, again, like you said, the system is kind of, set up for some of these people that once they get on the top, it's like, it's hard to compete. But
Yeah.
I feel like there should be more. We used to have more innovation in this country. I just feel like there's so many issues I have with my computer and my phone. I'm like, why can't someone come along and create some competition that's better than this shit?
Well, there's a couple of reasons for this, and this is a reason I'm a big proponent of universal basic income, because one of the problems is that people are so pushed to their limits. Most people, the average middle class person and the working poor, can only just get by. They're exhausted. We work ridiculous, work days, 40, 50, 60, 70 hours a week. You get 2 days off when you can maybe spend time with your family or do whatever the hell it is. If you have, you don't have time to do these things. You don't have time to innovate and create. You're just exhausted. It's just, and also the idea is, it seems there's so many roadblocks in the way of creating these things that we lose so much potential in individuals because they can't go to the schools they need. They can't do the things. I mean, education in the United States is a disaster. Higher education costs so much money, and it's so exclusionary, and it's exclusionary for a reason, right? I mean, it makes the competition at the top lower and lower and lower. Every single hurdle you put in the way of someone on the bottom who wants to get up makes it easier for the people on the top to stay on top, and their families and their people around them, and that's what it is. So I think that if you introduce something like a universal basic income, what you allow people to do is you allow people to, I'm going to take a chance on starting a business, because if that business fails, I don't lose my house. You know what I mean? Or I'm going to go to school because I know the school is paid for. Or, if you get people out of medical debt, out of school debt, if you start giving people some money in their pockets, two things are going to happen. One, they're going to spend that money. Most people who don't have a lot of money because they spend a lot of money. So that money is going to go back in the economy. It's going to fund its own system. But there are going to be people who are going to be able to use those opportunities to take the next step and the step after and the step after. And so, like even in my case, people go, well, why aren't you playing more theaters? Well, it costs a lot of money. It cost me $3,000 to rent it. It cost me $2,000 to promote it. I've got to come up with $8,000 to do one of these. Like, I'm a working comic and I'm doing fine, but I can't do that like 2 or 3 times a year. If I fail, I got to move. You know what I mean? So like, you can't take those chances. You can't make those steps unless you have some sort of safety net that allows you. And I'm not talking for people who are already wealthy. I'm talking for people who are like trying to climb out. It has many benefits. If you look at things like, take like someone in an abusive relationship, it gives them the ability to get out. Someone who's raising a child by themselves or a couple of children by themselves, it gives them the ability to provide those children with the chance to get education, get after school. Maybe you've got a kid who could be a piano prodigy, but you can't afford piano lessons because you're just getting by. We lose a piano prodigy. And so I think we have to, as a species, we have to get our emotional intelligence and evolution up to where our technological evolution is. Capitalism, the way we're doing it, doesn't work. It works for a few people. It destroys everything around it. I mean, look what's happened in the last 200 years. We don't have to live like this. We don't. We could be a lot better. And I'm not saying people can't be wealthy. Of course they can be wealthy. But they need to do it inside a system that allows opportunity for others. And so that's the part that frustrates me. And I know that Canada, I know that a lot of American media says Canada is the socialist paradise. It's not at all. There's very little. We're quasi-socialist. We have some socialist programs, but even things like, I don't pay for medical insurance. So if I get sick, I go to the doctor, which means if I need medical care, I can get it. It means I'll probably live longer. I'll be healthier. I can contribute more. The money I don't spend on going to the doctor, I buy a car, I buy a TV, I do these things. Those are little tiny things. Imagine if every doctor that came out of university or every lawyer or everyone didn't have a student debt. What are they going to do with that money? They're going to buy things, right? Back in the economy, that money gets filtered down. People who maybe, if I could just get this, if I had a little extra money, I could build this new computer. They can do it. They can do it. So that's, I think, the step.
Who's going to make the cars? If I have a universal income, I don't want to make cars.
Well, the thing is, it's not.
See, that's my fear with something like that. Yeah. Is like everyone just goes, well, fuck it. I'm just going to watch TikTok all day and smoke weed.
Well, the thing is that's the thing is it's so they've done pilot program, and some people are going to do that, but those people are probably already in a system where they're allowed to do that. What it is if you do a job you want to do it. Yeah. I mean, people don't want to work the jobs they don't want to work. Not everybody. Look, I have friends who love cooking, who love being chefs and everything. Like I couldn't imagine doing that. I couldn't imagine doing it. It's insane to me. People
true.
can't imagine doing the job I do. So I think everyone just needs to find, and people in these pilot programs for this, which we've had a few up here and in other countries, it actually increases employment. People go to different jobs that they never thought they could do before. They take a chance. They try things. They try for promotions. It
I'm all for
actually,
that.
yeah. And automation is coming to take away the
That's
car building
scary
jobs
shit.
anyway. Yeah. And so it's going. I mean, look, the cashier job that someone doesn't want to do, that's pretty much gone now. And it's only a few years before those jobs are replaced anyway.
A
And
lot
those
of
are
the
jobs that people don't
driving,
want to do.
I think self-automated cars.
Yeah.
I drive
Truck
Uber
drivers.
part time. I think I can't be doing that much longer. I hope the podcast takes off.
Yeah. Long
They
distance.
already have the
driving.
self-driving cars here. Have you seen those?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
They're scary, man. There's nobody behind the wheel. It's crazy.
They freak me out. It's a little bit like Ghostbusters or something. I'm like, who's driving the car? I'm like,
no, it's more like Terminator, like like one of those like sci-fi things where the machines take over. It's kind of freaky.
Well, and that's the thing too, is as we move towards this technological revolution where we're about to undergo a medical revolution where people's lifespans will change drastically, probably the wealthy, but their lifespans will change. People will live longer. So having 2, 3, 4, I mean, when I was young, having 2 or 3 different careers in your life was unheard of. And now people do it all the time. They change careers all the time. I mean, your productivity changes. You can do more things with your life. As robots and as automation comes in and take away the jobs that, I mean, look, you don't need humans to build cars. You don't need humans. The specialty cars, the stuff that, the Ferraris, whatever, but to build it, you don't need humans. We already don't have humans doing most of it. As soon as those jobs are replaced, those people who have to put headlights in a Ford Focus, that's their job, and they hate it. All of a sudden, they were like, maybe I'll do this for a different, and they create, people take chances and create more jobs. I think ultimately, there's always going to be people who don't want to work. There's always going to be people who don't want to do things. But there's people who have jobs who don't want to work. They just show up and they do nothing.
Well, that's definitely a problem too here. Like, where there's a lot of people that just, I'm noticing it, that were the people that just don't give a shit. Like in so many jobs, like everything, like I'm going to get my car fixed. The guy doesn't give a shit. You go to a restaurant, the waitress doesn't give a shit. I'll tell you where they do give a shit. If you ever been to Mexico, you get treated like a royalty down there. Like, oh, hey, senor, come on in. Like, they just like, they kiss your ass. I'm like, this is great. Like, I wish that we could be more like that in America, like have more pride in our work, no matter what you do. I just think,
well, that's the point. I mean, I think if you do what you love, or if you do what you want to do, there'll be, and there's, like I said, there's always going to be people who, anytime you have a population, you have groups of people where the accountability goes down. When you have the anonymity that comes with massive population, if you've got 50 people in a room, they're all accountable to each other. If you're not pulling your weight, the other 49 people do your job. But when you've got 50 million people, no one knows and no one can tell. So what happens is workers and people are told that they are expendable, that they can be replaced, that what they do is not that they're treated without value by the companies a lot of the time. And so what happens is the series resentment sets in and discouragement sets in. And I think that's a portion of those people. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying that people just have had enough. They're exhausted. And I think that, when you get people saying, well, I know it's your weekend, but you should still be working for the company. There's absolute madness going out there like that. And then there's a certain group of people who just don't want to work and aren't interested. Those people will always exist. But I think a lot of people, it's just like they have to separate their lives into, this is the robot part of my life where I do the job thing. And then this is where I get to have my own life. And I think that that's the problem. There's been studies where they go down to 4-day work weeks, and it's been so much better for not only men.
I think that is a brilliant idea. I don't know why they haven't done that. And in fact, you could almost do 3 if it was just you're working all day.
Yeah.
You're going to put in about the same amount of hours, I think. And all the studies say that you'd be more productive and happier. And
they
recharged.
are. Looking after COVID showed us really briefly, because up here in Canada, for people whose job was directly affected by COVID, they were given $2,000 a month, which is essentially a universal basic income stipend. And it allowed people to continue to own, because otherwise those people would have not been able to stay in their apartments. They would have been able. So all of a sudden, those landlords aren't getting money. The government's not getting money from that. It just helps the system to. It's not a lot much of money. But the other thing is,
have the inflation thing that we had here, though, because we're still feeling the inflation from years ago.
That's global, right? We got that. That's just a general. I think that there's a lot of lack of there's people who twist the numbers for their own agendas on both sides, left and right. But there's also a general lack of understanding of the system of economics and how it works. And people go on and on about, "Oh, we're in debt." Well, that's how countries operate. They operate in debt. And who do they owe that money to? They owe it to themselves, and they borrow. It's a big, long, complicated thing. What we did do here was a huge amount of people started working from home, like they did everywhere else. Productivity went up when people were allowed to not be in this regimented. So many companies up here have, including government departments, have started letting people work from home because they're more productive. Now, imagine if we took it one step further and be like, oh, you know how you're exhausted all the time? What if we gave you one extra day so you were a little bit well rested? Your mental health would be better, which means you're not taking mental health days, and it's not a tax on the system. That's the other thing about a UBI or something like that. For us up here with socialized medicine, it's expensive. It's not as expensive as everyone says, but it is expensive. It's our most expensive program. A lot of that is mental health stuff. A lot of that is people are, they need help because they're exhausted and worn out, and money is the number one stressor in most people's lives. You take that out of the equation, you release that pressure, you can save money on policing, you can save money on mental health, you can save money on healthcare. I mean, these are things that can happen if we take the chances. It's just that it's such a big thing because a lot of people don't really understand how it works. And it doesn't matter how many studies you do, practical application is there needs to be a country of a decent size that steps forward and goes, okay. And I think it's going to be like Denmark or Norway or Sweden. It's going to be one of them. It's going to be one of the, because they're essentially democratic socialists, that steps forward and go, okay, let's try this. Let's try this for 3 years. Let's see what happens to the country in 3 years if we do
I'd be
this.
very curious to see.
I would too, because I know that in the small, because we did test it in Canada, in a small, in one of our provinces in Manitoba, and the results were fantastic. And this was in the 70s, and then they changed governments, and the government came in and shut it down. And so I think that if we were able to, we've got to try something, because people are miserable. You see it when you go to shows. People are tired. People are
you guys probably
out.
have the homeless issue up there too. Our homeless is getting really bad in the States, especially where I'm from, Seattle. I mean, I'd never.
Oh, Seattle's bad.
10 or 15 years ago, I remember driving in and seeing these blue tarps everywhere. I was like, what is going on? Like, it's just
bad here. It's bad here. And that's the other thing too, is I had a joke about that. And I was like, because I had this thing about homeless veterans, and I talk about homeless veterans a bit, and the audience gets uncomfortable. I go, you know what's great about this? You didn't think about homeless veterans until the big bad comedian brought it up. You're going to go home to your apartment with no homeless veterans in it, and don't write a letter to your politician about homeless veterans you weren't going to write, because until I mentioned it, you didn't think about it. And it's not your fault. It's because you can't think, because it's too heavy. It's too much. You drive by a food bank. Canada is one of the richest countries in the world. The United States is the richest country in the world. There are lines for food. What are we doing? Children are starving to death in the richest countries in the history of the world. What the hell are we doing wrong? And so we need to really examine, and this is what I said about emotional evolution. We need to, as a species, evolve enough emotionally that all of a sudden altruism isn't rare, it is the default. That all of a sudden empathy isn't rare, it's the default. That instead of get yours, it's get everyone's. Get everything for everyone. The American dream is a great idea, but it turned into a dream of collecting things. What it should be is a dream of community and individual achievement and growth as a person, and as a country becoming better because each part is good. But you cannot have a successful country when the foundations are starving children and broken people who are you can't. It's an artificial, it's a balloon on a string, and the people holding the string are running out of energy, and that balloon's going to fly away. And so I really hope, because like I said, my son is 6. I really hope that his world is going to be so very different than the world. And I think social media will help with that. It's terrible right now, but it will help, because I think all of a sudden accountability is coming back. All of a sudden the sea of anonymous people has changed. It's like, oh no, I may have never been to Iran, but I've seen what people live like in Iran now, because I have a friend who's a streamer there, and I see, and I'm like, oh, that changes the way I perceive things. Those small incremental changes and the way we educate ourselves will slowly but surely, I think, move us to the next step. That's my hope.
Yeah, I agree. I think that in my philosophy, it's that I feel like everyone has a purpose, And you're right. At the top, when you get to that level, when you're very successful, I don't think it's to collect a bunch of things and be greedy. I think it's,
Mhm.
okay, I figured out my purpose. I'm good at something I'm doing. I'm successful. Okay, now the next step is to, the growth of a human being would be to help other people do that. I'm
Yes.
already doing that as myself. And I've
Yeah.
only got a couple thousand subscribers as a podcaster. I'm
Yeah.
helping podcasters only have a couple hundred subscribers,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
That's the
love doing that.
best.
And you
That's
actually makes you feel better.
I know, and that's the thing that I don't understand. It's like if you said to me tomorrow, you could have $100 million, but you can't ever do comedy again. I would have to say no, because the $100 million would
Love
be
it.
great at first.
Love
I
it.
mean, I would give that money away as much as I could. I mean, obviously, you provide for your family and everything, but then you go,
Sure.
well, I got this money, I can help people. But then ultimately, at the end of it, I'd be like, well, I've done some good with this money, but now I'm empty because I can't do the thing I do. I can't. This is my purpose. This is what I do.
Right.
And
That's
and
way more important.
exactly. And
And I'm sure you've done this too, but I've eaten at really nice restaurants. I've eaten at shitty restaurants. I've stayed in fancy hotels. I've stayed in shitty hotels. I've been in really nice cars. I've been in shitty cars. There's not that big of a difference. It's not
it's
like you
not.
stay in a
No.
big hotel and you're like, oh my God, this is like, I mean, yeah, the only thing that I think would be different would be if I was rich, I would want a private jet because I hate flying commercial.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, and that's the thing too. Is like I always said, this is like if you are a very wealthy person and you want to have the trappings of being very wealthy, no one's going to look. Elon Musk does a lot of weird shit and says a lot of strange things, and he's got a bit odd. But
Doesn't he live in like a tiny like trailer or something?
who knows? I mean,
He doesn't live in a mansion. He lives in
he's
like a small little.
he's a
Uh,
strange man.
he's
But the
very
thing,
strange. He's
but the
part
thing,
autistic, I think.
But the thing, oh, totally. But the thing about this is like, so say you had someone who has $100 billion, and everyone's like billionaires are the worst and everything. But every year that person, like, because Elon Musk, they said this, like Elon Musk, cure world hunger, and he's like, give me the numbers, I'll do it. He didn't actually
He
do it.
did. No, didn't
But
he
imagine,
donate a
no,
bunch of money?
but he didn't actually. He could have solved the problem with the stroke of a pen. But imagine if he did. So all of a sudden you're going like, Elon Musk's a real dick. Did you see what he said? And you're like, yeah, but like he also cured world hunger. Like, you know what I mean? It's such a get out of jail free card where you could be like, I am a maniac and I say crazy things, but think of all the people who aren't dead. And you have to be like, he's got 5 private jets, but also he cured malaria or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it's so you gotta kind of be like, I mean,
like
just do the
right
good
into
thing.
it.
Yeah, do the good thing so you can do way
Sure.
worse things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like everyone's going to be like, I don't care that you have $100 billion and you're not paying as much tax because you spent $6 billion on wiping out all the medical debt. So I mean, go get it. You know what I mean?
Fair
So
enough.
I don't understand why they don't do it, and I think that's why I'll never be a crazy billionaire, because I don't understand why you wouldn't
Yeah.
just give it away just to have like just because imagine the shit talking you could do at a bar if you're sitting there and everyone's just like, oh, you think you're so tough? It's like, oh, I'm not tough. But you know who's tough? All the people who now have good nutrition because I paid for their food for 20 years and no one can talk shit.
That's how we need to change it. Society
Yeah.
is instead of shaming people for other dumb stuff that we do, let's shame the people who are selfish pricks.
Yeah, that's what we should
I don't
do.
know.
It's like if you've got. I used to have a joke, and I go, we should treat greed like we treat every other mental illness. We should throw people in jail because we don't understand it. Like if you see if someone's got a $30,000 watch on, I'm like, nah, away you go. Put them in
Yeah.
a chokehold till a cop shows up.
Exactly. Well, one thing I always do on my podcast, I always end promoting a charity or cause.
Yeah.
Something that is near and dear to your heart. I mean, it's clearly a lot of things, but is there one that you want to shout out here that after people watch your special, they can go maybe donate a few bucks if they have it?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a place called Covenant House, and it's
I've heard of that.
Covenant House, and
promoted
it
that
helps. Yeah, it helps homeless street youth and people who gives opportunities, not just people who are unhoused, children who are unhoused, but it also gives them an opportunity for programs and everything too. And so we do some fundraisers for them, which I think is, I just think that that's how it starts. We got to help because a lot, some people end up on the streets because of mistakes, but most people end up on the streets because they don't have a choice and they get stuck. And we hear, like we talked about the homeless problem, we have a really bad homeless problem in Vancouver, in the downtown east side and stuff like that. And it just makes me so sad to think of all the people that should have got a chance. And so Covenant House, they start at when, especially when people are young and they're the most vulnerable, and they help them climb out and get the resources they need. And they have a great track record. And they just put up a brand new facility just down the street from us, and it's fantastic. And you can see every day that because I walk by it on my way home, and you can see the changes on people's faces every day. And so I think that to me, that's just something that really resonates with me, is like, that's how we change things. We change things for the next generation and the generation after. We teach them that you're not going to be forgotten about. And caring makes a difference, because maybe they go on to do, because those people do, they, give people a chance, and that's, you give people a chance to make a change, and they'll surprise you, hopefully.
Oh, I agree. I think everyone, like I said before, everyone has a purpose. Everyone's got something to do, and we just need to help people find that. So that's a perfect start if you're homeless, you can't, then you're just worried about trying to get, figure out where to get your next meal or whatever. So yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Definitely a huge issue here that we can help out. So people could donate to that, and then check out your special. It's free on YouTube. I watched it last night to make sure I have as good or better than is what it's called.
As good as or better than,
As good, as good.
Yeah,
or just follow you on social media. You got great clips, your YouTube, everything.
Just
it's
follow
all good
me,
shit.
and I'm there. And and if you follow me on Instagram at This Is Simon King, or TikTok at it's pretty much This Is Simon King across the board. There's links to everything, and then come say hi. So I'm always glad. And thank you so much for this.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
thank you.
And if you ever come to Arizona, let me know. I'll definitely come see you. Or if I'm in Seattle, I might have to make the drive to Vancouver. You do
100%, 100%, absolutely. Yeah, I do.
Yeah?
I do all the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll probably be in Seattle this summer at some point, so I'll try to find
hit me up. Message me. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
All right,
so
see you,
much,
Simon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. The very funny and very smart Simon King. Definitely check out his stand-up on all social media and YouTube. There's lots of clips on there. Just watch a few of those clips and you'll be hooked. And of course, as always, liking, sharing, commenting on social media and YouTube for the guest and for this episode can help us both out. And I appreciate that. I appreciate all your support for my guests and the show. Have a great rest of your day and shoot for the moon.